Hello, I'm Mary Martin, Director of the UN Business and Human Security Initiative at LSE Ideas. It's a research program that's devoted to mobilizing private sector contributions to sustainable development and peace. I'm here today with two distinguished LSE alumni to talk about what financial centres, such as the City of London, can contribute, can bring to today's societal challenges. Michael Mainelli is Lord Mayor of London, but perhaps better described as a polymath, whose career includes leading city roles in accountancy, investment banking, heading the Ministry of Defence's Evaluation and Research Agency, and founder of ZYEN, a think tank which promotes societal advance through finance and technology. He's a computer specialist and author of a humorous risk-reward management novel. Yes, there is such a thing. Ketan Patel is chair of the Force for Good initiative, which seeks to influence how capital is deployed to address major global issues. He's a former head of Goldman Sachs Strategic Group and co-founder of Greater Pacific Capital, which invests in businesses to achieve local and international sustainable impact. Welcome, both of you, Michael and Ketan. Can I start this conversation by asking you about your current roles, how they draw on your past experiences, and what you seek to do with them? Ketan, tell us first.
Sure. So, Force for Good is one of two important roles that I'm delighted to be able to play. Force for Good works on what does it take to create a sustainable, secure, and superior society for the world at large, and takes the UN Sustainable Development Goals as its benchmark to measure that. So we try to shed light on the capital flows across the world, how those flow or don't flow towards the global south and towards the biggest issues. And then we identify solutions that we think could bridge the gap with the mammoth task of leveling up the world. So, what does it take to actually do it? And that's the key focus of what we do. And the intersection of capital and technology is particularly focused for us. That's why I'm particularly delighted to be talking to Michael, who has the sort of background that can really make a difference and is in a policy chair in one of the most important financial centers in the world.
Michael, tell us a little bit more about how that intersection plays out, and tell us about maybe the nuts and bolts of your role and even your daily schedule.
Okay.
Give us a feel about how you're doing this job.
Well, probably it's best to start off with what is a Lord Mayor. And the Lord Mayor is the leader and representative of the Square Mile. And I refer to the Square Mile as the world's oldest democratic workers and residents cooperative. We've been holding continuous elections since the middle of the 7th century, so we're nearly 14 centuries old. But as was customary in the medieval era, we give workers the vote as well as residents. And so within the Square Mile, we have 615,000 workers. And that's actually up by 90,000 when we had the Brexit vote 8 years ago. We also manage about 13% of global assets here in London, which is up from about 11% 8 years ago. So these are big numbers and a big play. One of the other aspects of the city, and why I guess my background is helpful, is that it's the polymath element. The city is about 1/3, 200,000 people working in finance and directly related financial services, but 1/3 in science, engineering, and technology. 8,000 of our 24,000 businesses are science, engineering, and technology. And the other third is quite rich, arts, media, culture, but also shipping. We still remain the largest professional shipping services center in the world with about 30,000 people. Not shipping insurance, just shipping services. So it's a rich mix, and it's nice to have a background that's bounced between research and science and accountancy and securities trading and economics. So both are there. And on our doorstep, we have within 2 miles where we're sitting here at Mansion House, some 40 learned societies, 70 universities, including LSE, and 130 research institutions. So I'm not going out to Oxford or Cambridge. It's a very intense knowledge concentration. And going to Ketan's point, what's the point of all that resource if it's not doing some good? And this year we've actually taken on all 17 SDGs as something we want to show and showcase how London can help the world solve these problems. Because if you live in Jakarta or Buenos Aires, you don't care about the numbers I just spouted. What can London do for me? And when it comes to sustainability, we believe quite a bit. We've done a lot, I think, but we can do a lot more. We'll probably cover that in a moment.
17 SDGs obviously covers a huge breadth of issues. Where do you choose to focus and prioritize in your work at the moment? What do you see as the biggest challenges
Yeah.
you can work on?
Well, the program that I have is something called Connect to Prosper, and I'm trying to celebrate the many knowledge miles that flow through the square mile, as I just enumerated, but on out into the world. We want to build connections. So, whilst we're covering all 17 SDGs on what we call coffee colloquies, specific events designed to create connections, we equally have a 100 Strong Knowledge Miles series online to help show the world what is London really thinking about. And those are going great guns. But I have deliberately picked 6 programs. So I have one on mental health, one on smart economy networks, one very, very much on science and constructing science so that we don't lose Category B offices to be destroyed, but we can actually recycle them as life sciences. Those are 3 uh, areas. But I think there are 3 that exemplify this idea of science and technology combining with finance. So one is my Space Protection Initiative, which is a proposal to use space debris removal insurance bonds, surety bonds really, as a condition of launch. We've had an enormous invitation to treat letter for several billion from 6 underwriters here. We've also had the 56 nations of the Commonwealth sign up to it, and we're currently signing up space companies. What we're trying to do is get this onto the G7 and G20 agendas as a requirement of launch. Second thing we're doing is AI. Both space and AI are important to us because of trade. So if you look at space, 40% of the SDGs won't be met if we don't have space. You need it for Earth observation, GPS, telemetry, and that's human trafficking. That's deforestation, that's climate change. So I sometimes think people need, in analyzing the SDGs, we've analyzed it and said we also need to do something about space debris now. So that's happening. AI is another area where we're concerned about trade and the proliferation of regulations. But as we've pointed out, ISO 42000 already exists. It's been signed by 170 nations. So why don't we just use that as the regulatory framework rather than creating state by state or nation by nation or industry by industry? Same way we regulate the maritime sector, same way we regulate food safety. In that area, we created a course which over 6,000 people in 56 countries have taken, where they learn about the ISO standards and ethics to do with AI. And at the same time, we created something called the Walbrook AI Accord, Walbrook being this address. And that was signed in Brussels 2 months ago by 30 nations, saying that we would propose that our governments use ISO 42000 rather than creating national legislation. So those are the 5 programs, but we're also going to understand focus on sustainability. And sustainable finance has been, frankly, something the city has been concerned about for so long, it almost belies the imagination. We passed the first Clean Air Act in the world in 1953. We were at Rio. We've been at every single COP. We proposed the carbon markets in the mid-90s. We created the carbon markets and launched the EU ETS here in April 2005. I've been working on sovereign sustainability linked bonds. We've been supporting voluntary carbon credit initiatives, both with standards and getting insurance underwriting for them. And so there's a lot happening here. We believe the problem is solvable. In fact, we think a lot of gains have been made, but we can probably chat about that.
Michael, pick that up. You just said the problem is solvable. And there's a lot of hopelessness almost around the world, people feeling, will we and can we really solve the climate change problem? That it's solvable. Would you reflect a little bit on that, please?
I think it's very important to limit the scale of the problem to carbon, greenhouse gas emissions. At COP in Dubai in December, you had many well-meaning people saying you can't solve the carbon problem until you deal with indigenous peoples, until you deal with gender equality, until you deal with transition rights, until you deal with third world funding, until you deal with poverty. These are all good issues, but if you're a problem solver, you know that you've got to cut things away and identify the problem you're solving and focus on solving it. So I think when you take that kind of ruthless view, that doesn't mean the other problems don't need solving. It's just let's solve carbon. I think the second thing is there's been a lot of talk about awareness. In fact, I've been on stage and said, I'm sick and tired of hearing that we need to make people aware. There's no point in awareness if they can't do something differently. And I would argue people have been aware for about 15 years or so. And if they're not, they've almost got to be blind and deaf. And what they really mean often is not aware, but they should agree with me. Now, that's a different thing. So you can be aware of climate change and have different views, and I respect that. So now we move into the solvability. Well, the first thing is it breaks down into effectively two parts, emission and sequestration. On the emissions front, what we need to do is to charge, as we would for any pollutant. And on the sequestration front, we need to make a market that encourages people to sequester greenhouse gas emissions in plants, in rocks, in whatever or direct air capture, or what have you. So those are the two basic technological approaches.
Yes, we're sitting here on the morning of the UK general election, but obviously across the world we're in a phase and wave of elections with different results. In your problem-solving approach, you've mentioned the technicalities, the expertise that exists here in London to meet some of those challenges. What do you want? Whatever the colour of the government that comes in, what's your ask of governments here and elsewhere to help move you through those problem-solving steps?
Well, we've got a 25 to 30-year problem. If it's going to be solved, we want to solve it in that period of time or sooner. I don't want to get into those debates per se. The problem we have in democracy is decision making. Now, a lot of people would say, so Michael favors Mussolini or something, or President Xi or something. No, I think what people think of when they talk about the decisiveness of a leader is actually that the leader tends to stick to the program. Right? We in democracies are really good at making decisions. We're so good, we make a new one every day. And we're dictating. So why these bonds are important is we want governments, as Chile and Uruguay have done, to have really serious debate before they make some pledge that they're not going to hold to. And having had that debate, to put a bit of money on the table to prove it. In fact, you're asking investors to come in and make 25 to 30-year decisions about a tidal project, about a hydrogen project, about solar panels or wind farms. You expect them to make that decision, and you, the government, hold the right to change your mind at any time because you might lose a vote. Well, that's not the way this works. I am really concerned, though, that the city is constantly seen as a place to solve problems. And to do that, we need to ensure two big things. One is that we remain accessible to talent. And so, as we in the city have done with all governments being completely into free and open trade, we would really like to make sure people can come in and do their work. That's respecting other issues to do with net migration, all, but it's that free-flowing access to talent and ease of getting in and being respected and building networks here that you may, as a student, come and spend an extra 2 or 3 years after your degree and have to go back because you're not permitted, but you go with the networks and connections, hence the Connect to Prosper theme. And the second thing is rule of law. Now, rule of law is a deep and rich concept, so it's more than just courts and lawyers. It's also arbitration, mediation. It's how people deal with each other professionally. Is my word really my bond? It's cultural as well as that. Those are the two asks we in the city have always had of governments. After that, we can pretty much do the rest. So I'm very pleased with the space protection take up. I'm very pleased with the AI, if those are legacies. That's great. Green finance has got another 25 or 30 Lord Mayors to run, hopefully, and it's a solved problem. But I would really like the legacy to be that the city is seen kind of a shining light on the hill. Anybody says, you two have got a problem in Jakarta, right? You know where we should go? We should go to London and throw that idea around. And so an example I've often given is a Patagonian wind farm project, solely for Patagonians, only for Patagonians. and the Patagonians say, we ought to go to London for a week or two. We'll learn something about turbines, the science and tech. We'll learn about new ways of funding and insuring it. We'll learn about some new materials, and we'll go home and we'll still do the project for ourselves. But London helped us.
Great mix of global finance and expertise and local needs.
Isn't it fantastic in the sense that the city is so intense in this square mile? As you said, you've got the education, you've got the science, you've got the finance, the ability to think about the world's issues at this very important time. A great transition between eras almost. Industrial we have this shift happening in the world that's disruptive, but in London it's an opportunity to actually make a difference in the world. Do you see it that way? Do you see London as that great buccaneering centre still that will do good in the world?
Definitely, definitely. In a way, it's baked into the culture here, because the new learning came from the Low Countries to London, to my ward of Broad Street. We have 25 wards in the city where the Dutch church is. Erasmus came over, sired a couple of kids, I suspect, ran out not paying his wine bill. But the new learning was the scientific method. And it was picked up by people like Thomas More and John Cole at the Mercer's company. Thomas Gresham left all of his money to the new learning, probably about 2% of English GDP in 1579. And then we had the Royal Society in November 1660. So we've always been that. And that's because in many ways the guilds, the livery companies, allowed you to talk to each other, allowed you to convene, which was a big thing in the Middle Ages, convening power, and also ensured that nobody got out of control power-wise. So I'm hoping people can come here and talk about things that they may not be able to talk about at home. I wish they could talk about them at home, but if they can't, feel free to come and chat them about them here. Feel free to be in venues where you're meeting a rich multitude of different people with diverse sets of skills, and then, if necessary, go home or stay here and get the job done.